Now that we know how to use arrays, where they're fast, where they're slow, we're going to get into a part that is not crucial for interviews, but it's good to understand how they work and how to build an array. Most likely in an interview, you won't get asked, hey, build an array from the beginning. But I do want to build those foundations for you so that we understand arrays from a fundamental level. So let's build an array ourselves. Now, in this video, we're going to be using the class syntax in JavaScript. So we're going to create an array class. Even though with JavaScript and many other languages, we can just do this and we've created an array. Let's see if we can build one of our own. Because as you'll find out as we go through this course, data structures are simply things that we can build from scratch. We can create whatever data structure we want. We can create our own data structure. The most common data structures are well known and are already implemented in most languages because they're so useful. But you are able to build any data structure you want from scratch. And as you'll find out, most data structures are built on top of other data structures. Now, to get started, we're going to create an array in JavaScript. But just a heads up, JavaScript is a bit of an interesting case. Arrays in JavaScript are just objects with integer-based keys that act like indexes. And that's what we're going to build. Different languages will have this implementation differently, but what we're going to learn here is still going to be applicable to how arrays work in other languages. So we're going to start off with creating a class. Let's start off with creating a class, and we'll call this myArray. And within the myArray, we'll have a constructor, which is the initial function that will be run when we create this myArray. And this constructor is going to have two data points. One is the length property, because with an array, we're able to determine the length of the array. And the initial length will be 0. That is how many items the array has. And then we'll obviously have the data within the array. And this is going to be an object. Now, what's the most common action that we have in an array? Well, it's the access, to access the data. So let's create a get method. And this get method is going to take an index to actually grab the data from memory. So I'm going to just say return this dot data. And if this keyword is confusing to you, make sure you watch the previous video. This dot data is just referring to this data that we've created in the constructor. And we're just going to return the data at the index that we are requiring. Let's see how this would work in action. To create a new myArray, all we need to do is say const new array. And we use the new keyword in JavaScript to instantiate this or create a copy of this class, like this. So now if I do console.log new array and I click run, I get my array that has property length of 0 and data that is empty. If I do new array dot get 0, index of 0, I get undefined. Well, because there's nothing in this object. We have no items. And JavaScript automatically has the type undefined when, well, there's nothing. Let's add our next method. That is the push method to add something at the end of the array. So I'm going to create a push method. And this method will take in an item that we will give it. And within here, we'll simply add this to the data of our object. It's going to add it to the length of our item. So because we have 0 items and the length is 0, this is going to add the data at this.data 0 index. And the 0 index will simply now contain the item. And because we want to keep adding items if we wanted to, we will say this.length plus plus. Because now our array has a length of 1 instead of 0. So that next time we run the push method, this.length will be 1, and the new item will be added at index of 1. And let's just return this dot length for now, because the typical push method in JavaScript will usually return the length of the array. Let's run this and see what happens. I'm going to say that down here, we'll have new array dot push, and we're going to push high. If I run this, I see I have my array, length 1. Data is going to have a property 0 of high. Nice. What if we add another thing? Let's do new array dot push, and we'll say u. If I run this, I have length of 2 now with index of 0 at high, or index of 0 has high, and the index of 1 has u. Very cool. What else can we do? Well, let's add the pop command to remove the last item of the array. Once again, we have the pop method that doesn't receive anything. We don't need to pass it a parameter. All we need to do is delete the last item in the array. We can simply have a variable, let's say last item, that grabs the last item in our data object. So this is going to just simply be this dot data at index of length minus 1. Remember, we want the index of 1. Even though the length is 2, because we're counting 0, 1, we want the last item in the data. And from here, we can just use the delete keyword in JavaScript and say this dot data at this dot length minus 1, just delete that item. And obviously, we need to decrease, so just shorthand here in JavaScript to decrease the length of our data by 1. And then finally, we can just return the item that we deleted. So now if I run another command, and by the way, you might see here that I've missed the semicolons in JavaScript. Most of the time, you can get away with not adding semicolons, and some people don't use semicolons at all in JavaScript. Don't get too distracted by that. Sometimes I forget, and it's not really important, at least for our purposes. Let's add a new item to the array. That's going to be the exclamation point. And I'm going to say my or new array dot pop. If I run this, I get an error saying item because this should be last item. There you go. Let's run that again. And we see that it's high u because the exclamation mark has been deleted. If I run pop again, I see that I have length of 1 and only high remaining. Very cool. All right, let's add one last one. And to show you why some operations in arrays are O of n, we're going to add the delete method. And the delete method is going to take an index, which item we want to delete. And in here, we will have to do a const item. So we're going to create a reference to this dot data index, which is the item we want to delete. And how are we going to delete this? Because remember, in an array, we'll have to delete the item, then shift the index of all the other data types by 1. Well, because we want to follow good coding practices, using the idea of single responsibility principle, let's add another function that does this for us, that does the shifting of data for us. I'm going to create a new method, and we do this in JavaScript using the this syntax, shift items. And this method is going to take the index that we received here in the delete. Now, this shift items, we can create it here and say that shift items method. And by the way, I use the words function and methods interchangeably sometimes. Method simply means it's a function within a class. So this shift items will be a method of my array. But it is a function. So this function, which is a method of my array, will have the index parameter passed into it. And this is where we do some fun things. We're going to have to loop through the items. So that's a for loop, which right away should ring the bell and say, ooh, this is an O of n operation. We're going to have an index of 0, or I of 0. Actually, instead of 0, remember, because we want to shift items, not all of them, just wherever the index starts from, we say index. And now I will have to be this dot length. So I is less than this dot length minus 1. And we're going to increment I by 1 each time through the loop. Within this loop, all we're going to do is say this dot data, our data, at each index that we loop through is going to equal this dot data at I plus 1. What just happened here? Well, we're saying start at the index that we want to start the delete from and iterate through it all the way until the end. And within this loop, I want you to take each item in the data that we have, and instead of what it had before, I want you to add the data that is right next to it at plus 1. So if we had an array that is 0 and 2, I'm saying from the index of 0 over here, I want you to now instead make 0 equal to 2. So index of I plus 1. So we're shifting the items to the left by 1. So we have shifted here all the items 1 to the left. And because we did that, the index that we gave it for the delete automatically gets replaced because that I is going to get replaced. Now, there's an issue here, right? Because now the very last item in the array, that is this dot data at this dot length minus 1, which is the last item in the array, will still exist. We've shifted everything over by 1, but we've never touched the very last item because we stopped when I is less than this dot length minus 1. So this is still full. So I'm going to comment this out and just show you what happens if we just leave it like this. I'm going to run the new array dot delete, and I'm going to remove the pop commands for now. And in the delete, I'm going to say I want to delete the U item. So that's index of 1. If I run this, I get hi, U is deleted, but then I have exclamation mark at index of 1, so the shifting is working. But at index of 2, I still have the exclamation mark because, well, we never deleted it. We've shifted everything once over, but we never touched index of 2. So all we need to do to get rid of that is the delete keyword to delete the last item, and obviously to decrement our length. Because we've just deleted an item, we can do this dot length minus minus. If we run this now, hey, look at that. Length of 2, hi, exclamation mark. Let's play a little around to make sure everything is working here. If, let's say, I add a couple more push commands here, and we'll say here R, hi, U, R, and then let's say nice. If I run this, I get hi, exclamation mark, R, nice. That doesn't make sense. Let's change this to 0 to remove the hi. If I run this, I get U, exclamation mark, R, nice. That still doesn't make sense. Let's remove the exclamation mark so that we only have U, R, nice. I'm going to run the new array, and we can delete index of 1, which is the exclamation mark, and let's see what we get then. If I run this, I get U, R, nice. Awesome. Now, you might look at this and want to add your own methods. You might want to, let's say, in here, return the last item just as a reference, which is how it works in JavaScript. But I think for now, you have an understanding of how arrays work and how they're implemented underneath the hood. We have simple O of 1 commands, which are really, really nice. But as soon as we have to start shifting indexes and changing things around, we have to loop over things, which makes it O of n, or linear time. I'm going to leave this for you as a playground after this lesson, so you can add your own things, maybe write it in different languages, and explore a little bit more into arrays. But this video is already getting long. I don't want you to get too bored now, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.